Please join with me in our reading aloud our mission statement. Our mission statement is why Unity of Charlotte is here. This was put together by our congregation. So please join me in reading it out loud. Unity of Charlotte is the place where we nurture a deep and mature experience of God through the practice of unity principles. Simply put, we are here to love, grow, and serve. Love, grow, and serve. Do we have anyone here for the first time visiting? I don't see any new faces. If you happen to be on Zoom for the first time, welcome. We're glad you're checking us out. Please put your information in the chat if you would like to receive a visitor's packet and some more information. For everybody, the way to keep in touch with what's going on here at Unity of Charlotte is to check us out on our website, especially our relocation information, which will be updated as we go along. We also have a newsletter you can sign up for, a Facebook page, and you can check out Sunday services from previous Sundays on our YouTube channel. And also, if you're now, if you wouldn't mind standing and joining us in My Soul is Welcome Here. Only if you want to. I don't know about you, but I need that song. My soul is welcome. I am just as I am supposed to be. How about you? All right. Some announcements. Potluck today. That's always fun. Join us, most of you know, in the fellowship area. We have plenty of food to share, and it's always a great time for fellowship. A couple announcements about Course in Miracles group. This is the Monday in-person group is on break until July 15th, and when they come back, they'll be meeting in new locations. You can check the website calendar or see Jim Fuller. This is not our Thursday morning Course in Miracles, the group that is going on as scheduled. On Zoom, thank you. And another quick notice, our Wild Women's Wednesdays has come to a closure. That was led by Kay Fuller. And when we get to our new location, we will look at what we want to do once we get there. But no more meetings on Wednesdays. Letters to God. Remember January? Does anyone remember January? The letters we wrote in our ceremony, those are available to be picked up in the right outside the sanctuary on the table. If you don't get them by today, we will put them in the post mail to you, and you'll get them that way. Summer series, dinner and the 12 powers. We had our first one, which was really so much fun. We really encourage you to attend one of these. Our next one is July 13th, which is next Saturday evening. And today's the last day to register. We need you to register on Breeze so we know who's coming and how many to give our host a heads up. So if you need any help getting onto Breeze to do that, you come see Reverend Jim and I will help you out with that. All right, relocation. We've said it before and we're going to keep saying it every Sunday because we're getting close. We are moving to St. Luke's Lutheran Church on 3200 Park Road. We are in the chapel with the red doors. You cannot miss it, which is kind of nice. I found out after our tour at St. Luke's that it is a tradition for Lutheran churches to have a chapel with red doors. I didn't know that, and I don't know what it means, but when I find out, I'll share it with you. Important to note, July 28th will be our last Sunday here, same time, 12 noon. When we move to St. Luke's the next Sunday, which is August 4th, our service time will be 11 a.m. So we'll keep reminding you of that. And it's summer. People are scattered, as you know. So please share the word with all your friends and other members of the church so that they can all have this information. Because this next one's hard. Some of you already know because this was announced in the Charlotte local news that Brent Simpson, who was one of the new members here at Unity, he joined last year, has passed. This was a sudden and rather tragic news. And for those of you who knew him, I know that it is hard news to take. We have the Celebration of Life service information posted on the bulletin board. We have it here, but if you want to know more about it, it's posted on the bulletin board. You can read it there. Part of what they're asking, the family is asking for is instead of flowers, to make a donation to a foundation that Brent himself organized, which I didn't know. I don't remember the name of it, but it was to support first responders and their mental health. So we are going to move into prayer, and I ask that you please hold Brent and Gina and their families in your hearts at this time. I invite you to gently close your eyes, open your hearts as we remember why we are here for each other, to love and support, to remember the eternal nature of life, and yet also embrace the transient, ever-changing form in our human existence. We know the beautiful soul that is Brent. that has moved on, but continues in a life journey. And we see him surrounded by our love as he's working through whatever his spiritual journey is about. For each of us carry our own burdens and our own unfoldment. And we come together as a spiritual community to encourage and uplift each other. So we share our sadness, our grief, but also the joy we felt in knowing Brent. The laughter we may have shared with him in his stories. The beautiful connection and giving nature he brought to this community when he was here. And then we look for those same qualities in each person here. That's what community is about. And knowing unity principles, that is the truth we live out, knowing there is only eternal life, creating, expressing, and loving. In gratitude for having these truths to lean upon, to hold, and to live out in our lives, we say thank you, thank you, thank you. So it is. Now please join with me as we speak our unity prayer of oneness. There is one presence and one power in my life and universe, God, the good, omnipotence. Now we'd like to open up this space for some silence in which you may speak aloud a name of a person you are holding in prayer or a situation you are holding in prayer that you would like to lift in prayer as a community. So please speak that now. And we know in the depths of this silence, every prayer has been heard, whether spoken aloud or simply held in our hearts, knowing that Spirit lives and moves and is active in every situation, ever present, ever healing, ever loving. And so it is. I'd like to invite Chris and Maria up to read from our daily word.
Good morning, everybody. Sunday, July 7th, daily word, beautiful. My open heart discovers the beauty all around me. I see beauty in soaring mountains and rolling seas, in majestic forests and kaleidoscopic fields and flowers. I hear beauty in music, songbirds, and the laughter and conversation of people in fellowship.
La palabra es belleza. Mi corazón receptivo descubre la belleza que me rodea. Contemplo la belleza en las altas montañas y los mares ondulares, en los majestuosos bosques y los campos de flores silvestres. Percibo la belleza en la música, el canto de los pájaros y las brisas de quienes comparten mi vida.
Searching beyond my senses, I discovered a greater depth of beauty, the mundane items and landmarks I may fake or granted, take on a deeper beauty when my memories fill them with meaning. My dear ones become even more beautiful to me when I pause to remember our fondness experiences and the love that binds us.
Al ir más allá de mis sentidos, descubro una mayor profundidad de belleza. Aquellos que doy por sentado cobra una belleza más profunda al dotarlo de significado con mis recuerdos. Mis seres queridos me transmiten aún más belleza cuando recordamos nuestras experiencias y el amor que nos une. Cuando avanzo con la mente y el corazón abierto hasta los objetos, lugares y situaciones más cotidianos, adquieren un valor y una belleza aún mayores para mí.
I move through each day with my mind and heart open. Now, even the most ordinary items, places, and circumstances become more and precious and beautiful to me. And all of us, with unveiled faces, see the glory of God, the Lord, as our reflection in a mirror are being transformed into the same image. Corinthians 3:18.
Mirando la gloria del Señor y cara descubierta, como un espejo somos transformados de la gloria en gloria a la misma imagen. Segunda de Corintios 3:18.
We're going to talk about, what do you think we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about trust. Did I make that obvious with this slide or not? We're going to talk about trust, but we're going to talk about this in terms of that intersection of trust and self-care. Because I sat with, what am I going to speak to this week? And this is my norm. This, you know, at the beginning of the week, I sit and I pray and I discern and try and decide what we're going to talk about. Reverend Lisa and I, many times, choose a theme for the month. So it's within that theme that I present to and I talk to. This is going a little off script because we were talking about something different this month of July, but it just kept coming back. Trust kept coming back to me, trust. So this is a peeking behind the curtains on how a minister selects his talk on a Sunday, because it just kept saying, I need to talk. Truly, I need to talk, and I hope you join me in the topic as well, because I think we can all join each other there as well. But as I was thinking about trust, I was at the same time working with self-care. I was feeling confused. I was feeling uncomfortable. I was feeling that angst of certain events in the past. And I started to do some research online. And I explored the idea of the idea of trust overlapping of self-care. And it ended up being like a Venn diagram. So you've got trust here. Everyone knows what a Venn diagram is. The subject of trust was here. The subject of self-care was over here. And what is it that overlaps? And then you see that visually with that Venn diagram. There's a huge amount of overlap using a Venn diagram with these two subjects. So it was like, okay, let's speak to these two things at the same time. We had homiletics teachers in seminary. Does anyone know what homiletics is? Shout it out. Homiletics. Homiletics, thank you, Jim. Homiletics is the writing and the delivery of a sermon. The writing, so think of, we don't call it that, but think of other faith traditions. They will say, oh, I sat through the homily, right? That's the root word. So we had two different semesters of homiletics within Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute. And the lesson that both of these teachers kept suggesting to us was that the messages you give, the talks that you give on Sunday, they need to speak to you. If you just pick at random, I'm going to use an example, one of the 12 powers, it's not really necessarily going to speak to you. It's not really where your heart is at any given moment. When you select that topic, speak to something that you're excited about. So that's why we're talking about trust and the intersection of self-care here today, because of those homiletics teachers that I got to learn from. So this is an intersection of these two things for me as well. The ultimate cutting to the chase of this topic was that healthy relationships grow and thrive in that environment of trust. That this trust brings more balance into your life, where you can thrive, where you can live with peace, and that high quality of living that where your day-to-day life feels good. So think about it. Think about a situation where you didn't have trust with either a partner or a work group that you were working with. And how did that feel? It was a struggle, probably, is what I'm going to guess. You had some anxiety in working with that group. But then let's shift and think about those times when you did have trust. How did that feel? Things were firing, I would imagine, on all cylinders, using the car metaphor. It felt good. You were able to share. You were able to participate. Things were good. The team worked. And that idea of self-care there, it almost took care of itself because you were feeling so good about what was going on. I like the word balance. When you're in those relationships of balance, or in those relationships of trust, balance naturally shows up. We're going to talk about three things today. We're going to talk about trusting yourself and others. So this goes both ways, trusting yourself, trusting others, that environment of trust. 2, we're going to talk about handling setbacks, what happens when it doesn't work. And then we're going to talk about the practicality of unity. Practical unity, what are some steps I can take, even tomorrow, the next day, or whatever as well. We're going to talk about those three things. So let's just jump right into trusting yourself and others. Do we have an expectation of trust in our lives? Ask yourself that question. Do you have, and I ask myself this question, this isn't just out to you, do I have that expectation that the universe is conspiring in my favor? Great. I hope so too. That's where I want to get to all the time. I'm not there all the time. Some of you are grinning because that's obvious. I'm not there all the time. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to feel. That's where, like I said, things are just happening correctly. The examples in my life growing up, I can think of 2 examples in my life of people demonstrating this idea of where they're coming from in terms of is the universe conspiring in my favor? My Uncle Tony, we had a fairly close relationship with my aunts and uncles in Los Angeles, California. All the birthdays, it seemed like every weekend something was going on, and all my aunts and uncles would get together, my grandparents would get together, and we'd have a group. I mean, it was 30-some people whatever, going someplace, doing something. So I got to know my Uncle Tony pretty well. And he felt the need to teach the young ones the lesson, you know, if it can go wrong, it will. Right? Here I am, 6, 7, 8 years old when he first started teaching us this. He'd gather the little ones around and he'd, you know, and it was interesting now, I think of this in retrospect, because for him, it did go wrong, right? Just what you expect. He's teaching, he's telling everybody he knows, if it can go wrong, it will. And it did. He was always, he was like he had that cloud over his head. That was my uncle. There was no trust in his life. He didn't trust himself, the choices he was making. He didn't trust others within his life. He was suspicious of everybody and everything. I decided when I was a teenager I didn't want to live that way. So that was a lesson in where I don't want to be, right? So thank you, Uncle Tony, for that lesson. My mom, on the other hand, always had the expectation and the trust in herself and the decisions she was making and the direction she was going. It was awesome. She showed me this trait, not necessarily without words, because she didn't sit me down and say, that wasn't my mom. She showed me how to live her life. She would step out with confidence. She would move forward step by step in grace and ease. And I saw this on a daily basis. And I said to myself, that's the way that I want to live. So she gave me a positive example to live for, and that's the way that I want to be. She would identify the path, whatever was going on, whatever she was trying to achieve, what she was trying to overcome. She would identify the path. She would take a step forward with that. She would take that step forward. And this was the interesting thing with my mom. My mom would take a single step. She wasn't a both feet jump into it kind of person, but she would take a step and kind of lean on it and test it out. And if it felt good and it was the right, then she would, and then the next, right? That was the lesson that I learned from my mom. There were other folks that would just jump off a cliff. That's not me either. But the step by step and then take another approach is the lesson I learned from my mom. Stepping out with confidence and truth is what she continues to do. She continues to do that as well. I'm going to share a little, I did not prepare this at all. My mom and I do the New York Times Wordle. Yeah, anybody else do the Wordle? You don't. There's a Wordle fan out there. There's a Wordle fan. We do it every single day. She lives in Oklahoma, you know, I live here. And we do it separately, and then we text each other the results, and we make fun of each other, and we have fun with it, and, she's probably better at it than I am, so I give her props on the Wordle. But it's awesome. I just love having that connection with my mom that way. Stepping out with confidence and trust. As well, when I was putting this talk together, I was thinking about what inspiration can we gain from the New Testament on this? And the first thing that popped into my mind is probably my favorite New Testament story is the idea of Peter walking on water. Peter walking on water. It's one of my favorite stories. Jesus was teaching one of the crowds on the bank of a sea, or I'm not exactly sure, but he was teaching. The end of the day had come. They were breaking up. Jesus was moving into his prayer time, so he was separating himself and going somewhere into the mountains. It doesn't really matter. He sent the 12 into a boat out on the sea, and they were going to meet him somewhere. I don't know if it was across the sea or or down the coast or whatever. But the 12 disciples were in the boat. Later on that night, so Jesus had spent his time and he was going to meet them. The disciples woke up and they saw Jesus walking on water towards the boat. And this was during rough seas. This was during some wind was going on. And there was some anxiety there with them. There was a lack of trust there. They didn't know what was going on. Jesus spoke out and says, "Be not afraid. Be not afraid." And then he invited Peter. This is going to be interesting when we look at it metaphysically in a little bit, because then he invited Peter out. And he said, and Jesus says, "Come join me." And he did. Peter swung his legs over, started to walk on water himself towards and meeting Jesus as they started to come together. Until some doubt entered in. I think of it as Peter maybe looking down. It's like, whoa, those waves are getting pretty big. Whoa, I can feel that wind on my face. Who am I to do this, right? And he starts to sink. And then what happens? What happens in the story? I hear Jesus did what? Jesus reached out and took his hand and helped him. And then they came back to the boat. So within Unity, we don't necessarily teach that these stories are literal, right? And you and I can have that debate any day of the week. Give me a call whether any of these miracles actually happened or not. I'd be glad to talk to you about them and where I stand with that idea. But we're going to look at it metaphysically. What does that story mean to you here today or tomorrow or the next day? What does Peter walking on water signify? What can you learn from that and put into practice? How about that faith or your expectation that you can do anything is there? That you can do anything. Not necessarily walk on water, or that's not important, what the thing is, but do you think you can do any given thing at any given time? That's the important part. Do you have enough trust to step out of that boat? Here you are, nice and snug in your boat, safe, feeling pretty good, and somebody has invited you where you don't think you can get to. What do? Do you have the trust to step out with them? Peter did. He was willing, even though he still had some doubt, to give it a try. The other thing metaphysically that I think about as well is what happened when Peter started to sink. He didn't just flail around. I think of it, and it doesn't necessarily say this in the New Testament, I think of it, he was brave enough to ask for help. He probably reached out, or at least Jesus reached out to him. I don't know. We're there for each other. We don't have to do this by ourselves. He reached out for help and was lifted up. The side story for me here is that this was a teaching moment for Jesus. A teaching moment to the 12 that said, yeah, I can walk on water. Yeah, I can do these things, but you guys can do it too. I am not that special. I'm a teacher at this moment, and I'm trying to teach you guys. your divinity as well. And Peter was the one that met him out there. He was ready to be taught. So it's not necessarily the miracle to prove that Jesus was God, but the miracle to prove to trust and to be willing and to step out. Trusting yourself. And here's where the intersection of those metaphysical Venn diagrams comes in. Trusting yourself. That self-care that we talk about it involves trusting your instincts as well in your gut. We met our last potluck in 12 Powers. We talked about wisdom. And wisdom for Charles Fillmore shows up in each one of our 12 shows up in your body somewhere, right? Strength was in the small of your back. Love was in the back of your heart. For wisdom, where do you think wisdom shows up? In your gut. In your gut. Why do you think it's in your gut? Charles Fillmore knew that wisdom is what we check in with before we step out. Before we step out, it's like, is this going to work for me? Do I trust this situation? It's a gut check, right? This is using our humanness, our human body, to check that out. So the wisdom of this is in the gut as well, the power of wisdom. And we talked about that on, I guess it was a week ago, that we talked about that. We talk about 4 new powers each time we get together for one of these. So I hope you guys sign up for the next one. It was really fun. This means acknowledging that Venn diagram, not only the trust, but it means acknowledging when you need to take a break, to take a rest, to take a mental break. So yes, we're talking about trust, but maybe, like Jesus, it means I need to separate myself and pray for a while. So trust overlapping, self-care. Jesus not only demonstrated what we can do, but he demonstrated the self-care piece of it as well. You see how important that is? It's the self-care as well. It's the mental break that sometimes we need. That building of trust that we do as well is something that when we're in a group, when we're in a relationship as well, we've got to admit that there's a building of trust. You don't just enter into a relationship. You don't just join a team and immediately have unlimited trust with that team, do you? There's a building of that trust. Again, kind of a step-by-step process with that as well. That building is consistently working on projects together. Maybe if this is a work team, it's working on a project, noticing how the pieces fit together, that you complete it, you're successful, you're celebrating together, and then maybe you work on the next one, and there's more trust. And maybe it works even faster and easier. But there's a building of that process that we know happens. Our relationships deepen as we trust each other, as we stumble, as we pick each other up, as we learn to trust each other more and more. Our relationships grow through that trust. It's not an all or nothing. There are levels to this, that building of trust as well. We start small and we work our way to bigger and bigger things. When I first meet somebody, I'm not necessarily going to put my life in their hands, right? I need to create a relationship with them and figure out where they are in this relationship. Where's my trust with them as well? How do we handle setbacks? So, trust and self-care. We've all had the setbacks, right? If you'll admit it, and I'm going to admit it, I've had the setbacks from time to time where things didn't go as planned. I thought that it was going to go boom, 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 and we're going to complete here. It went boom, boom, whoops, boom, boom, and crash and burn maybe. I mean, it was all over the place. We've had those setbacks. Setbacks are a normal part of our lives. And there's discomfort in that, and that's okay. What we're saying is when things didn't turn out the way you had expected or planned, it's okay. It's okay that you feel, again, checking in with your gut, it's okay that you feel uncomfortable with that. Again, that's just our human nature as part of that. The poet Rumi would instruct us, and he would say, this too shall pass, right? He's acknowledging that we stumble, we fall, we feel kind of yucky at that point. But this too shall pass. Within Buddhism, you relieve yourself of that suffering with the knowledge that this is temporary. Buddhism talks about the temporary nature of reality. So what we're saying is that stumble, that discomfort can be temporary. Yes, you're feeling bad. Yes, you've screwed up somewhere. But you're going to get through it. It's going to feel different. It's going to feel different tomorrow. It's going to feel different an hour from now as well. And then know that it's okay. Know that it's okay to adjust along the way. Like I said, your plan was A, B, C, D out this way. Know that that can change. Know that you can take several steps in one direction and that you can course correct. Again, through prayer, meditation, discernment, it might be, whoa, C is not, I've done A and B, but C is just, maybe I take a little step to the side and make a correction here. Know that that's okay. Know that the correction is not giving up. We're not talking about I take step A and B, and then I feel a little twinge, and then I give up. That's not what we're talking about. It's not the giving up. It's not the starting over. It's simply an adjustment. It's simply an adjustment. And then you continue on as well. But it's not that we don't make a commitment to the process either. We do want to be committed to these plans that we make, these directions that we want to head to. We do want to make that commitment. We're not saying we're waffling so much with our adjustments that we never get anywhere, but we do allow ourselves to trust the situation and make that adjustment. A big lesson during the preparation of this homily, I don't usually use that word, of this discussion, this talk here today, is the idea of healing past trauma in terms of that trust, in terms of that self-care and that overlapping. That self-care involves practices within this environment such as therapy, such as journaling on your own or whatever. Those are legitimate ways of bringing self-care into this process. This is possibly these modes are a way of rebuilding trust where they may have faltered at one point. And like I said up front, I picked these topics because I need to hear them, because this self-care, this thing is something that I'm going to be doing in the weeks ahead. This is, for me, this is shadow work for me. If anyone's Jungian, you understand that this is shadow work that I am going to be doing. And if you're in that spot as well, for whatever you're working on, I encourage you to look within yourself. This isn't about what somebody else did to me. This is about what was my part in this situation. I'm on this team. This thing didn't work out. We took steps A and B. It broke down. What's my part in this? What did I contribute to this? Why was I? It's looking inside. It's asking yourself the tough questions. Why did this thing show up in my life? That's the work that I'm going to be doing. I invite you to do that as well, and whatever's showing up in your life. Doing that shadow work, going deep with the exploration of those buttons. I call them buttons. Some people call them triggers, so it doesn't matter. When somebody presses my button, it's something I need to, that's a little bell. Ooh, I need to work on that. Because I don't want that button to show up every single time in my life. I don't want to live a life that's avoidance, that's just avoiding things, right? And my example is, there was a time when I would get on, I learned how to drive in Los Angeles. I lived on the freeway for on my commute to and from wherever I was going. And there are some aggressive, let's just call them assertive. There are some assertive drivers in Los Angeles. Let's put it that way. And from time to time, they would push my button, right? It's like I felt like I had to slam on my brakes as somebody was changing lanes in front of me. I don't want to live my whole life with that discomfort, and I'm surely not going to stop driving. That would be avoidance, right? Well, I'm just going to stop driving. That way that button never gets pushed. That's not a solution. So working with these triggers, working with these buttons, working with the shadow work, doing your journaling, meeting with a therapist, that's how we get better with that. That's how we get better. That's healing past trauma as well. So I'm going to finish up here as we talk about practical unity. What are the things that we can take with us over the next week, months, the next lifetime? These are the practical things. Brene Brown talks about in a couple of her books, she talks about vulnerability and oneness. Vulnerability and openness. Vulnerability and openness. Trusting yourself to be vulnerable and open with your needs and your feelings in the form of self-care. You're just not going to close off. It might mean that you're sharing with others where you're at with a certain situation. How open and vulnerable can you be in any situation? It involves being honest with yourself. It involves your need to feel supported and nurtured and safe in any given situation. That's the identification that this vulnerability and putting yourself out there in this process, that's where it gets to. Openness and communication. So here's my crazy example. Here's my crazy example of openness, vulnerability, communication. It might mean a spouse saying to their partner, you know, I felt a little weird when you introduced me at that party as the little woman. That felt a little weird. I have a need to feel a little more respected in that. Would you be willing next time to introduce me as your wife or your husband or whatever this, right? That's being vulnerable, right? It's showing, you know, I felt a little squeamish when you did that. It didn't feel right. I'm sharing with you how I felt. Can you meet me halfway and next time introduce me as whatever. And you can, this process works in a lot of different ways, but this is the vulnerability that we're talking about here as well. Being vulnerable enough to ask for things in these relationships. Maybe it's your team. Maybe it's on the board. Whatever it is, it's being able to be vulnerable enough to ask. And being vulnerable and openness, I want to caution us here as well, because I have had conversations with folks. Being open and vulnerable does not mean saying everything that comes into your head, right? Living your life without a filter is not necessarily healthy. That's not what I'm speaking of here. What I'm talking about as well is that idea, that Buddhist idea, that our thoughts go through 3 gates before we actually say something, right? Think about these 3 gates. A thought enters your head. Is it true? Yes, it is true. Okay, I'm going to go through that gate. If it's not, then everything stops. But is it true? Is this thing that I'm thinking, is this thing that I want to say, is it true? Yes. I go to the next level. Is it necessary? Yes or no. If it's no, you stop, right? If it is necessary, is it kind? The Buddhists are saying, don't say it out loud if it's not true, necessary, and kind. You're going to save yourself and everybody else a whole lot of time and effort. Here's my example. If I'm at the mall and I see a little baby in this thing, and it's the ugliest baby I've ever seen. Is it true? Yes, that baby is ugly. Is it necessary? No, it's not necessary, and it's not kind. I'm just gonna say something else. So that's the approach. That's the lesson there. We also talk about one last thing. We also talk about setting boundaries. And before I get to the end of this, effective self-care involves setting boundaries within our lives. It's sometimes that's required during this trusting process. Sometimes setting a value. I had a coworker. I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida for 10 years out of my 30-year career in IT. And this coworker could not say no to anybody. She could, it wasn't in her. And the thing about that is, I was on her team. The thing about that is that it became a reputation for her. People would dump work on her because, oh, could you just do this thing for me? And then, yeah, I guess so, right? She would say yes. She would say yes to everything. She could not say no. So what would end up happening, and we would see this over and over again, even other teams were giving her work. It was incredible. And she would say, yeah, I guess just this one time, I'll do your report for you, you know. So what would happen is by Friday, she would work a 12-hour day on Friday. Those guys were off at happy hour, you know. They were getting her to do stuff. That's not healthy either. Knowing when to say no is where we want to be. That's part of self-care as well. So today we talked about trusting yourself, trusting others. We talked about that self-care, that overlap of the two, handling setbacks, making adjustments along the way, and being okay with that. And these practical ideas of being vulnerable, setting boundaries for each other. Know that I love you, I bless you, I appreciate you. I see the divine in each and every one of you. Namaste. Let's move into just a minute or two of meditation. I encourage you to wiggle around a bit. Feet on the floor, grounding yourself, finding a space for your hands to rest, gently closing your eyes if that feels right, or staring at the candle on the screen, either way. Noticing your breath, noticing that rhythm of the inhale, the exhale, and relaxing into this time. And telling yourself that my consciousness becomes one with the anticipation of wisdom and trust. I have a deep expectation for trust in myself and others every day, in every way. I know as well that worldly circumstances do not dictate my reality. My reality is spiritual. My reality is based in trust. I trust myself, others, and the universe. And we begin to come back, bringing our awareness back into this room, noticing our breath once again, coming to the point where we want to open our eyes and take with us this feeling of calm and peace with us into our day. So grateful. Namaste.
Thank you, Reverend Jim, for that great talk. 3 really big challenges happen when you're in homiletics class. One is to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and to keep your talk 20 minutes. 2 out of 3, pretty darn good. I'd actually like to invite Nancy Dartnall up to give a testimony about consistent giving. Nancy.
Okay, well, some of you might have been here last fall when I was invited to do the same thing, and I gave you a little history about how I learned to donate to church growing up and got into the habit of that. But Unity, when I started attending a Unity church and reading New Thought principles, it gave me a different view of giving as not just an economic decision, but as a spiritual practice. 18, 20 years ago in Charlotte, there was a New Thought minister named Reverend K, not our Reverend K Fuller, but a different Reverend K, who would say, well, the 10 Commandments are great as far as they go, but they really just keep you out of jail. They don't tell you how to live, except for a couple of them. And what attracts me to Unity and New Thought and keeps me in the practice is that we do learn tools for living. And for growing and developing our spiritual nature. Things like affirmative prayer, the 5 principles, the 12 powers, reading Myrtle Fillmore's Healing Letters, which I will do someday, and giving and tithing, not just to charities, but to the source of our spiritual nourishment. Some of those other practices are things that we do privately that we take in. But giving is a spiritual practice where I can give out. And that's why I like in the service here, we don't just put our donation into the plate and it disappears out the back. The reverends have the collection plates come forward and we bless and send our gifts out. It kind of completes the circle of that practice for me. So, giving to Unity, which is one source of my spiritual nourishment, is just an economic decision, but a spiritual practice for me.
Thank you, Nancy. Well put. And on that note, we're moving into our offering period of the service. And so I invite you to take that gift. If you have it in your hands, or if it's something you do online, then have a mental image of that, the energy of that giving that you are offering, which is so generously offered to Unity of Charlotte. And please join with me as we do our blessing together. Joyously, I give this gift, knowing the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. The light of God surrounds us. We are light. The love of God enfolds us. We are love. The power of God protects us. We are power. The presence of God watches over us. We are presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.